Okay, so this is the third and I think the last video in the sequence of me reading these to you. Okay, just before we departed from Barrow, word came via the scientific grapevine that Gordon C. Haber, a PhD candidate from the University of British Columbia, was observing a wild pack of wolves in McKinley National Park, which we know is now called Denali National Park. It's the one we watched the videos on. We hopped aboard a bush plane, swept out over the vast North Slope, and then winged down the Anaktuvuk Pass through the transatlantic pipeline through which the transatlantic pipeline is plotted. I thought of Charlie Edwardson, and I looked down on the Hickle Highway, a road that was supposed to be parallel to the pipeline. 3 huge road graders had scraped back the grasses and mosses from the tundra and let the sunlight strike the ice crystals. The ice crystals had melted zipper fashion, one after the next, and turned the soil to a mush that avalanched the huge machines down the mountainside into the river. I could hear Charlie's firm voice, "You can't rush the North," and that's true. It took them years to build that road. It should be noted, Anaktuvuk Pass is the one village on the North Slope where there is trees and there is mountains. So when they talk about it being treeless, that is true for 7 of the 8 communities. But Anaktuvuk Pass is far enough south that you actually can see the trees. In fact, I think that picture that's at the top of the next page, where you can see trees in the background, that's probably near Anaktuvuk Pass. And I say that both because there's a river there, and there is one in Anaktuvuk Pass. And in fact, a little pretty little bridge as well over the river, and trees. So I could be wrong. They could be in the national park. I'm not sure. Oh, but no, in fact, I'm reading ahead a little bit. They're in the national park at Sanctuary River. Okay. In Mount McKinley National Park, we found Gordon Haber cutting wood beside his cabin at Sanctuary River, which Denali National Park, obviously. Jays sang around him, and the ground squirrels watched him, for Gordon was a part of the ecology. He had spent 3 summers with the wolves and was preparing for his 2nd winter. When I explained that I was in Alaska to write about wolves, he took Luke and me to watch a pack at their summer den. For 10 days, we laid on our bellies, peering through a spotting scope and binoculars at these remarkable beasts. We saw the black alpha awaken, saw his pack nuzzle him under the chin ceremoniously, heard him open up the hunt song with a solo. When all were alert, he would swing through the willows, the huntsman at his heels, to test the crop of moose and caribou for harvesting. We never witnessed a kill, but we saw the ravens hover over kills and the hunters return home as fast as barrels to regurgitate food for their pups. We watched the puppies play bone ball, tug-of-war, jump over the babysitter, and we became wholly involved in the wolves. Luke, who had come to Alaska to fish, never strung up his rod again. One dawn, we joined Haber on a trip to the deserted nursery den of the pack. We hiked through the bog, sapagum moss, and over the tundra to a remote valley. Pushing our way through the tangled willows, we climbed to a bluff highway above the den, above the river. There, in a layer of white sand, was the birthing den, a generous tunnel dug into the earth. It was topped with flowers and set beneath a garden of twisted spruce. The entire home expressed family love. A play yard was worn in the front of the den. Around it were large saucer-like beads. That's better angle. Of adults. I could envision them watching the trembling pups, grins on their faces. Most heartwarming, however, was the shaft that led straight down to the nursery chamber. It was sort of a telephone. During the first few weeks after birthing, when the female remains in the den with the pups, the other adults stand over the hole and listen to the sounds from the den below. whimpers, sucking sounds, content grunts of happy puppies. When the adult wags his tail and says, "All is well," and the other wolves wag their tails too. Just before leaving their den site, I sat down beside the entrance and scanned the wide valley. I wanted to see the rocks and mountains as the wolf sees them. I looked down, and my blood turned to ice. There below was an enormous grizzly, head down, fur swinging as he came down our trail. Instinct warned me to stand still, but reason told Gordon to act. He wanted us ahead of the bear so that we would not meet him face to face when he turned around to go home. "Run," Haber said. Luke shot off like a pronghorn antelope, Gordon like a deer, and I ran as if I were weighed down with lead, but I must have been zooming. As I leapt down the frost heave, I passed a jay in flight. When we were safely ahead of the bear, now why were they running? Because they were ahead of the bear? Because the bear hadn't smelled them yet. Okay, so the bear wouldn't have some magic way. He might hear them and know there's something up there, but he wouldn't have an idea what it was until he smelt them. And if they were upwind, then they could safely run away and be far enough so that the bear wouldn't probably come looking for them. Okay. We heard a wild sound as if an orchestra was tuning up. I looked back. On top of the hill stood the female wolf and her 9 fat puppies, who bounded towards us to greet us. One yip from their mother, and all the pups vanished. As if there was any doubt in my mind that wolves speak to each other, it was banished in that moment. Within the next few days, I was also to learn that wolves control their birth rate. This is done by the alpha male. When the land is rich and there are many moose and caribou, the alpha will permit 2 or 3 females to mate with their lifelong mates and have puppies. If, on the other hand, the crop is poor, the alpha will prevent mating. He achieves this by approaching a pair in January or February when the females come to Estes. Because he is the leader, they must grovel before him or at least sit down on their haunches. This effectively stops breeding. Eventually, the alpha will need only to glance at a pair to keep them apart. None argue back. In some years, the alpha does not breed, possibly to vary the strength and genetics of the pack. The wolves that Luke and I were watching had mysteriously solved another problem. The pack had but one female. The number of adults was low, and the land was rich. As if to rectify the problem all at once. Yes. The wolf gave birth to 9 puppies. A large litter is 6. And now I was convinced that wolves and men have much in common. Both have leaders, population problems, are hunters, and live together year-round. Both have language. So the difference, I said to myself, is that man shares and cares about his fellow man. When I heard this, the beta of Toklet pack was injured by a moose. He limped off to a deserted patrol cabin, seemingly to die. Gordon Haber saw him collapse on the floor. The next evening, as Haber snowshoed home, he saw the alpha, a large piece of meat in his mouth, slip into the cabin and drop it before the beta. The alpha returned every night to feed his friend until he was well. Upon hearing this story, I felt that the line that separates the beast had faded forever. For me, it was replaced by a sense of continuity, even brotherly love. I said to myself, has evolved from these animals. So now if you remember, that's what the dog in the little short story we read by Gene Craighead George, the alpha bringing meat to the one that was injured. To realize this was at first disconcerting, then very exciting. Perhaps we were, after all, traveling a beautiful road. Perhaps we were evolving towards a mutual aid and not towards killing and destruction. Perhaps the growing attitude that we must share the earth wisely with the planet, beast, and man is much more deeply rooted than we suspect. When I returned home from Alaska, I was unable to publish my article on the wolf for the Reader's Digest. The editors used a piece by a scientist, L. David Meck, the author of the remarkable work, The Wolves of Isle Rolf. His is a beautiful story, yet I was frustrated. I had notebooks of material from generous scientists and I lived with and talked to the wolves. One afternoon, an old friend, Pat Allen of Harper and Row, called, and I poured out my problem. "Let's talk," she said. The following afternoon, I was telling Pat about the wolves, and then about my idea. By now, I understood why Romulus and Remus, the legendary founders of Rome, had been suckled by a wolf. This is an animal who might raise a human child. It's a puppy-loving, communicative wolf who is sophisticated enough to share. To me, the ancient statue of Romulus and Remus is a symbol of continuity between the lower forms of life and civilized man. What she's talking about there is the city in Rome. I'm sorry, the city in Italy, rather. Rome, the biggest city there, the capital, head of the Roman Empire, named after them, of course. The story is started by two brothers who had lost their parents but were raised by wolves. So if you've ever heard someone say, "Oh, you're raised by wolves," that also goes back to that story. So anyway. "I want to write a story," I blurted to Pat, "about a girl who lives with a pack of wolves and learns about mankind." A year and a half and 3 rewrites later, I turned in a battered manuscript to Harper and Row. This is the book that won the Newberry Medal. This is the book that won the Newberry Medal intrigues me because so many people have shared so much with me in its creation. Dr. Fox, Dr. Folk, Gordon Haber, a lifetime of brilliant editors, Elizabeth Riley, formerly of Thomas Y. Crowell, Andrew Jones of the Reader's Digest, Ellen Rubin of Harper and Row, Josephine Roberts, my agent, gave me encouragement through sunshine and blizzard, and John Schoenaher, I have no idea how to say that, the gifted illustrator that made Julie and her wolves walk off the pages and into life. My parents, Frank and Carolyn Craighead, are also part of the book. They have bestowed to me 3 wonderful children, my brothers, nieces, and nephews, a whole pack, the love of nature, and a deep respect for the earth and precious cargo of life. Thank you, librarians, for this great honor. For you, the ultimate sharers, you give your love of books to our children. I have one last bouquet to toss. Bouquet is like a group of flowers, like a section of flowers together. The bouquet of inspiration. And by now you must have guessed where I'm going to throw it. Right across the vanishing wilderness, across the wild rivers, the tundras, and over the delicate wildflowers and grasses, past the nose of the 10-legged bear, right into the midst of the vanishing species. I throw this bouquet to the loving wolves. Okay, so that was her speech that she gave when she won the award. I want you to read it, a little bit each day to someone, and then I've read it to you. So, all right. Hope to see you before the end of the year.